Let's take a look at using some of these file functions. So first of all, I'm going to create a data file. I'm just going to type in number and a character on each line. So that's good enough. I'm going to save. Let's call this trydata.dat, and I want to make sure that I save it under all files. It's not a .m file, it's a .dat file. Now I have trydata.dat. Okay, so let's open this. So I'm going to assign the result of the fopen to a file identifier. I'm going to open it up for reading, and I'm not going to suppress the output, so you can see the number that's actually stored for the file identifier is 3. The reason for that is when I first get into MATLAB, the default input and output devices are assigned the first two identifier numbers 1, 2. So then when you start opening up files, they will have file identifier 3, 4, 5, etc. Normally we don't care, but I just wanted to show that. So we have the file open. So one thing we could do is we could read the first line from the file into a variable a line using fgetL. So specifying the file identifier. So we'll see what that is. Let me just use the length function to look at the length of the line. So you see there are 5 characters, the 4.4 space A from the first line of the file read in. So if I did that again, a line gets the value of fgetL of fid. That'll read the next line from the file, and so forth. And then we want to make sure that we close the file when we're done. And you can see from the result of that that it was actually a successful file close. Okay, so let's open up that file again. This time I'll suppress it, and we know that it opened successfully. So now I'm going to use the fscanf function to read from this file into a matrix variable. So we're going to use fscanf. We're going to pass the file identifier. Now we have to have the format string. The format string I'm going to say is every line of the file is a float, and then a space. So I'll actually put the space in there, and then a character. And I know I'm reading 2 things from each line in the file, and I'm going to not assume that I know how many lines there are in the file. So that creates our matrix. So every line from the file, 4.4 space A, gets read into 4.497, the first column, for example. And then I'm going to close that file. Okay, let's just display this again. Okay, and now I'm going to use text scan. So once again, I'm going to open up the file, and now we're going to store the result in a cell array. So I'm going to use text scan, and the file identifier number and the format string %f space %c, and that'll do it. So we read into our 2 column vectors. So for example, if I said CA curly braces 1, that's the first column vector, which was the numbers, and CA curly braces 2 was the second column vector, which was the characters. Okay, so let's close that. So that's an example of using one file. Now let's take a look at a different kind of file. So in this case, I'm going to create another file, but now I'm going to put the character first and then the number. And you're going to see that unfortunately this makes a difference. All right, let's just save this as, I'll call it tryit2.dat. Make sure it's not a .m file. Tryit2.dat. Okay, so let's type this. Okay, I'm going to open up the file and store the result in a file identifier. Oops, try it 2.bat. I'm going to open it up for reading. I'm going to assume that worked. And now I'm going to read it into a matrix variable using fscanf. Oops, it's file identifier. The format string is a character, a space, a float. And if you noticed how I actually created that data file, in the editor I typed a character, a space, a float, and the new line character on every line. Okay, so that read into my matrix, and I'm going to close that. Now I'm going to go back and repeat that. We're going to open up the file. We're going to read into a matrix, only this time I'm not going to put the new line character in my format string. And you see that didn't work. Now this gets a little bit tricky, but because in the format string I'm trying to read a character, a space, a float every time. The first line it did that correctly. It read in the character A, it skipped over the space, it read in the number. But then there's that new line character there. So the next time I try reading in a character, the new line character is actually sitting there. So it tries reading in that character, which is a new line character. So it read that in. That's the 10 that you see. And then it tries to read a float, and that's where it fails, because the next thing is actually the B on the next line. So I really do have to specify that new line character, unfortunately. Let me close that, with the fscanf. With textscan, however, I don't have to include that in the format string, because with textscan, we think of this as being columns and not line by line.